Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I'm watching Hitler by Oversimplified. Now this is not the original video, it's a re-upload because for some reason on the Oversimplified channel this video just doesn't exist. I'm guessing it's banned in my country or Oversimplified took it down for some reason, so I'm having to watch a re-upload. Unfortunately this is only in 360p, so the quality is going to be terrible. Sorry, nothing I can do about it.
Look at this baby. So gentle, so innocent. You'd think this
and
child
what it's
would
going to
become
grow
a
up to
good
be.
man. An honest man. Well, think again.
Nope.
Hitler was born Adolphus Hitler in 1889 in a small town in Austria-Hungary. His father, Alois Schicklgruber, was born out of wedlock, but eventually changed his name to that of his stepfather, becoming Alois Hitler. Alois was a mid-level Austrian customs officer, not
Yeah, Hitler wasn't even German, he was Austrian. Though I guess it doesn't matter, because Austria was annexed by Germany. And something very interesting, there was a vote, and I believe more than 90% of Austrians agreed to be annexed by Germany. Interesting, isn't it? A lot of people seem to forget that fact.
really rolling in cash, but certainly rolling in women. He married a rich, older lady, but then immediately started having affairs, including one with a much younger house servant.
Well, let's be honest, he's only marrying this older one for the money. So now he's gonna marry a younger one for the more obvious reasons why you would marry someone.
A few years later, he left his sick wife to be with his mistress, but since the Catholic Church didn't allow divorce at the time, he couldn't marry her. So he waited for his old wife to die and had a child in the
till she
meantime.
dies.
Then his wife died, so he married his mistress and had another child, but then his new wife got sick, so he employed his much
And she
younger
died as
cousin
well, huh?
Clara to take care of her. Then when his new wife died, he immediately got Clara, his cousin, pregnant, and then married her. In that
His
order.
cousin?
He immediately got Clara, his cousin.
Probably not a blood relative. Oh, never mind then. I guess it's not... Oh, I can't try and make this seem like it's not that bad. It's pretty bad. It's his cousin, man.
Pregnant, and then married her. In
Although technically, most countries allow marriage between cousins, which is pretty weird.
that order, you rock star. Clara and Alois had 3 children together, who all tragically died while in infancy. So when the 4th child, Adolf, came along, Clara spoiled him rotten. The Hitlers had 2 more kids, and the family moved around a few times, meaning Adolf had to attend 5 different elementary schools. Adolf's father was strict, quick to anger, and took most of it out on the eldest son, until he had enough and ran away at the age of 14, leaving 7-year-old Adolf to do most of the chores and get berated by his father. The result was a difficult relationship with his dad, while he was super attached to his mother, who worried over him and his health excessively. Hitler did well in school at first. His grades were good and his teachers praised him. He was popular with the other kids and enjoyed gathering them together to play war games. He also loved reading, and particularly liked stories about cowboys and Indians. As he grew older though, he started to get into trouble. He was caught smoking once, organized a raid on a local orchard, tormented his pro-Austria religion teacher with symbolic gestures, displaying his allegiance to the idea of united Germanic people under a greater German state in defiance of Habsburg Austria. You know, the usual. All of this enraged Adolf's father, who punished him severely. The area of Austria-Hungary that Hitler lived in was once part of the German Confederation, and many of the people who lived there considered themselves to be German. Adolf tended to just go against whatever his father said, and since his father was an Austrian public official, Hitler got big into German nationalism. This enraged Adolf's father, who punished him severely. Around this time, a family tragedy struck. His 6-year-old brother, whom he loved a lot, died of measles when Adolf was 10, and was buried in the cemetery just across from their home. Around this time, neighbors reported a change in the young boy. Strange behaviors such as talking to trees and staying up late staring at the stars from the cemetery walls. He lost interest in religion, and his school grades started to decline, which enraged his father,
like depression.
Severely. It also didn't help that he had just entered high school, and the cool city boys treated him like a rural peasant. He had to repeat a grade and had little interest in most school subjects, instead spending his time reading and drawing, which he was quite good at. One day his father said, "Son, someday you'll be a big balls public official like me." And Adolf replied, "No, father, I'm going to become an artist and soar high above the clouds with the eagles."
Well, he certainly became a public official.
This enraged his father, but by this time he was an old-ass man, so he just sort of let it go.
Or at least most of Europe.
And then died of a lung hemorrhage. Hitler just about passed his final semester, and celebrated in the typical way, by getting blackout drunk and wiping his ass with the certificate. However, he didn't take the overall final school exam, instead just dropping out. The now 16-year-old boy didn't take the overall final school exam, instead just dropping out.
So he passed, but didn't take the final exam. How does that make any sense? Why would you not take the final exam if you've passed?
Now 16-year-old boy was unemployed, without much purpose in life, and for the next 3 years he stayed that way. He spent most of his time at the opera with his only friend, August Kubizek. Kubizek later wrote his memories of the young Hitler and said he was passionately interested in many things, felt he was in many ways better than others his age, was quick to anger just like his father, and an incredible speaker once he was ranting. When he was 18, he said very sad goodbye to his mother and went to Vienna to take the entrance exam for art school. He failed. Soon after, he had to return home. His mother was sick and her health was rapidly deteriorating. Hitler stayed by her side, and when she eventually died, the family...
He failed art school, they rejected him, and this is where it all started.
Doctor said he had never seen someone so overwhelmed with grief as Hitler was. Then Hitler returned to Vienna, still hoping to find a...
Wasn't Hitler's family doctor, like, Jewish? I think there's a story, I'm not sure if this is true, but apparently, like, this was the one Jewish guy who Hitler liked, something like that.
Career in the arts, but he never did. Instead, without parental support, Hitler ended up on the streets. Now in his early 20s, he spent a few rough years living in and out of home
Pretty sure he was in the army in World War I.
It's hard to pinpoint exactly when and how Hitler's extreme ideological beliefs formed, but his time in Vienna would have certainly played a role. Anti-Semitism was widespread in the city. The mayor, whom Hitler supported, was an outspoken anti-Semite. There were many right-wing anti-Semitic newsletters, which Hitler took a keen interest in. He bought into the conspiracy theories and became a firm believer in the idea that there are many races in constant struggle with one another, the purest of which were the German Aryan people, and the worst of which, he believed, were Jews. Since Austria-Hungary was a
Well, let's be honest, Hitler didn't just dislike Jews, he disliked a lot of other races too. All the Slavs, for one, and he eliminated a lot of other people too. It wasn't just based on race. Like, people with disabilities were also killed.
Ethnic empire full of lesser races, Hitler wasn't a fan. So when he was 24, he moved to Munich in Germany to avoid doing military service, and for one more year he was a drifter on the streets, until something huge happened. In 1914, long-standing tensions in Europe erupted into the First World War. Crowds across Europe celebrated the news. Within days, Hitler volunteered for the German army. The war gave him a purpose in life.
Makes sense.
His fellow soldiers gave him friendship and brotherhood.
What else did he have?
Despite the horrors of war, Hitler considered it to be the best time of his life. He was reportedly a brave soldier and was awarded the Iron Cross, first class. He was also very lucky and had many close encounters with death. His luck ran out in 1916, however, when an artillery shell injured his leg. He went back to Germany.
Imagine if that shell hit in a slightly different spot, slightly closer to him. He'd be dead. How much would that have changed history after World War I? If Hitler just disappeared, if he was just dead, gone.
Germany to recover, and was outraged to find a general apathetic anti-war attitude among the exhausted and hungry German populace. With the war turning against Germany, he returned to the front lines, but was temporarily blinded by a British gas attack in 1918.
Mustard gas, I think.
Still recovering in hospital, Hitler learned of Germany's defeat and surrender. The terms of the peace treaty were tough on Germany.
He's lucky to have survived.
It had to pay a lot of money and lose a lot of soldiers. These conditions weakened Germany and humiliated the German people. Europe's borders changed after the war too.
It crippled
Countries were formed out of Russia's lost territory. Austria-Hungary was dissolved, and there was one big new country splitting Germany into two. Hitler, seeing the country he loved humiliated like this, said that hatred grew in him for those responsible, by which he meant communists and Jews, who he believed had stabbed Germany in the back by spreading dissent and anti-war propaganda back home.
Alright, on to part 2.
Since Germany's military had to be reduced, Hitler could no longer remain a soldier after the war, but he kept working for the army as an informant. After the war, communists in Germany had attempted a revolution, and the government was worried about communism in general. So Hitler was tasked with infiltrating and reporting on any new political parties that could pose a communist threat. A new party called the German Workers' Party threw up a whole bunch of red flags, so Hitler went along to one of their meetings, but found that they weren't communist at all. They were extreme right and shared many of his extreme beliefs, so he left the army and signed up to join the party. His fantastic speaking abilities impressed the party's leadership.
So is this where everything started?
He very quickly rose to the top. He decided the party needed a makeover, so he renamed it to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi for short, and he gave it a new color scheme. The Nazis weren't very specific on policy, but Hitler made extravagant promises to return Germany to its former glory by undoing the Treaty of Versailles and reuniting.
He made promises to return Germany to its former glory. Literally every politician ever. They make so many wild promises and they never deliver on any of them. Every politician ever.
All ethnic Germans into one nation. He also said that only pure Aryan people should be allowed to be citizens and that all Jews would lose their citizenship. These ideas were already common in extreme right politics, but what set the Nazis apart was Hitler himself, and they quickly became the leading party on the extreme
Germany
right.
for Germans.
Many of the political parties in Germany at the time had paramilitary wings, and the Nazis were no different. Hitler set up the very descriptive Whole Protection Detachment, later changed to the very delightful Gymnastic and Sports Division, and finally settling on the ominous Storm Detachment, or SA for short. Their job was to defend Nazi party meetings and intimidate political opponents, and they would frequently engage in battles with communists on the streets. Since the Allies had demanded a reduction in Germany's military size, many trained soldiers
the military
were left
joined
unemployed.
them.
They liked the Nazi ideology, and it was only natural for them to join the SA, which grew larger and larger over time. The new democratic government that formed after World War I was pretty weak and ineffective. In order to pay reparations to the Allies, it started printing more money. The problem is that printing money doesn't actually give a country more money, it just makes money less valuable. So as the country printed more and more money, it became worth less and less, and the currency crashed. In 1919, $1 was worth
That's called hyperinflation.
about 4 German marks. By December 1923, $1 was equal to 4.2 trillion marks.
Holy
the price of bread
crap!
rose to 200 billion marks. Banknotes became worthless. Unsurprisingly, in such an
You could
economic
wipe your
crisis,
ass with that,
Germany
and you wouldn't
struggled to
lose
pay
any
the
money.
Allies. The French were pissed about this, so
it's
they
worthless
occupied
already.
the Ruhr, an area full of factories, and took the economic output from the area as payment. They treated the German civilians badly, and in total, approximately 130 Germans were killed during the occupation. Germans were furious, and Hitler and the Nazis thought that now would be a great
I would be
time to
furious
lead a
too if I was a
revolution.
German.
In November 1923, inspired by something a certain bold Italian man did a year earlier, Hitler
Mussolini.
stormed a meeting at a beer hall and called for an uprising against the government. With his supporters, he marched on the streets of Munich.
Is this where he got
hoping the
arrested?
police would join his side. They did not. Hitler was put on trial for treason. He could have been sentenced to life, but the right-wing judges thought he was a pretty cool guy. Hitler knew the judges and knew that they would be lenient, so he took the opportunity to make impassioned speeches during the trial. And in the end, he was sentenced to just 5 years in prison, of which he only served 9 months. And when I say prison, it was more like a pleasant hotel stay where he had
this is
plenty
where he
of
wrote
time
his
to write a
book, Mein Kampf.
The whole affair was covered by the media nationwide, and it made Hitler famous. Hitler and his extreme message were now known throughout Germany. But the everyday German still didn't care much for him. In the 1928 election, the Nazis only won about 2% of the vote. Many were still intimidated by all the violence and the shouting and how unpolitician-like he was. But a new economic crisis would change all of that. To help Germany pay its reparations, America agreed to give it loans. In October 1929, the Wall Street crash happened, and America wanted its money back. The economic strain this put on an already struggling Germany was severe. Unemployment skyrocketed, poverty was widespread, and Germans were sick of it. It was clear that the newly formed democracy wasn't working. In the face of crisis, Germans began moving to the political extremes. If you were German and wanted change, your choices now were either the communists or the Nazis. Hitler claimed that he was the only one who could return Germany to its former glory. The Nazi Party used propaganda to make Hitler seem like a great and powerful man, and they gave the German people a scapegoat to blame for all their suffering. The promise of a single strong
You know, the more I watch this video, the more I realize why certain politicians today are being compared to Hitler.
Dictator was a breath
I'm sure you
of
can
fresh
guess
air
which
for
ones.
Germans after years of failing democracy. Some bought into his extreme ideology. Some didn't agree with the racism, but were willing to vote for him anyway. Many didn't know much about politics at all, but just got caught up in the hype. Election after election, the Nazis became more and more popular until in 1932, they became the biggest party in the German parliament. Hitler came to truly believe that he was some sort of great, destined savior of Germany. He turned megalomaniac. He decided to run for president and did surprisingly well, but still lost to the extremely popular World War I general Paul von Hindenburg. Since he was now the leader of the biggest party, he demanded President Hindenburg make him chancellor. But Hindenburg was reluctant, seeing that Hitler was clearly such a big racist. Industry leaders urged Hindenburg to give Hitler the chancellorship, fearing the rising support for communism, and leader of the Center Party von Papen, who had been secretly negotiating with Hitler, said to Hindenburg, "How about we make Hitler chancellor on the condition that I get to be vice-chancellor and most government jobs go to us moderate conservatives? That way, I'll get to keep my power. I mean, we'll get to keep our power and we'll control it
he only cares about himself.
Little puppet. What could possibly go wrong? As it turned out, everything. Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in January 1933, but he was not yet a dictator. In February, the German parliament building was set on fire. Historians still aren't sure who did it, and many suspect the Nazis did it themselves, but Hitler blamed the communists, and he convinced President Hindenburg to sign an emergency decree allowing him to imprison all communists and other political opponents. Communists and others were sent off to the first concentration camp in Dachau. At this time, the elderly
Nothing
President
wrong with
Hindenburg
that.
passed away, giving
They're
Hitler the
communist, fuck
perfect
'em.
opportunity. He introduced a law to Parliament that would allow him to make all future laws and decisions entirely on his own. With his political opponents imprisoned and the SA intimidating others, Hitler's law passed.
Damn commie
Just 2
bastards.
months after becoming Chancellor, Hitler was now a dictator. He still had one problem. The leader of the SA wanted the SA to take over the job of the regular German army, and the German army didn't like that idea. Hitler needed to maintain the support of his professionally trained German army,
Time to get
more
rid
so
of the
than his
SA.
rough and rowdy SA. So one night in June 1934, he had Röhm and many other of his own SA officers rounded up and murdered. While he was at it, he took the opportunity to brutally settle some personal scores as well. Politicians who had disagreed with him in the past, reporters who had printed negative articles about him, one guy who did absolutely nothing, but they thought he was someone else. In some cases, even their families were murdered. In total, up to 200 people were killed in what became known as the Night of the Long Knives. The army, now satisfied.
Most of the intelligent people started leaving Germany once Hitler came to power. Because they saw the writing on the wall. They knew what was gonna happen. And they left before it happened.
Satisfied that they wouldn't be replaced, pledged total allegiance to their new Führer, and Hitler's control was now absolute. Life in Germany changed violently. Freedom of the press, expression, and public assembly were suspended. Jews were initially branded and their businesses boycotted. And eventually, Hitler would go on to have 6 million Jewish men, women, and children killed in concentration camps. Hundreds of thousands of people were forced into sterilization for physical and mental imperfections. The Hitler Youth became a way to brainwash the young. Boys were trained to fight.
That's what I was talking about, people with disabilities.
And returned home from camp violent. Girls were told their purpose was to have many pure Aryan children, and they would sometimes return from camp pregnant. When their parents were understandably horrified, their children would threaten to turn them over to the Gestapo for standing in the way of Germany's greatness. The standard greeting changed, and you could be sent to a concentration camp for not using it. This way, it seemed like everyone was a Nazi supporter. If you dared oppose Hitler, or speak out against him in any way, you also would be sent to a concentration camp. German nationalism captivated the young adult.
Yeah, that's why in a system like this you can't really just overthrow the leadership, because if you're anti-government, you're just gonna get killed. And as long as there are enough people who are brainwashed into actually believing someone like Hitler, there's nothing you can do. And Hitler is obviously only gonna keep the most loyal people closest to him.
Extreme ideology and anti-Semitism festered in him as a young man living a hard life on the streets. Germany's defeat in the First World War filled him with hatred and a thirst for vengeance. A political movement that treated him like a god, and hundreds of thousands looking up to him as their savior, made him a megalomaniac. And soon, his aggressive foreign policies would drag the world into a second tragic global conflict, otherwise known as...
Okay, a little bit about that last part at the end. Even if Hitler didn't come to be, World War II would have still happened. Mainly because of the Soviets. And because the peace that was after World War I was less of a peace and more just a ceasefire. World War I and World War II are kind of like one conflict. The 20 years in between, it's just one massive ceasefire. It sucks that this video is censored in many countries because this is history. Stuff like this shouldn't be censored. We're never going to learn from history if we don't talk about it. If we just avoid it, we're never going to learn anything. We're just going to keep repeating past mistakes. But yeah, this is YouTube. What can you expect? Anything historical and historically accurate gets banned. But shitty AI videos, which are just total bullshit, nah, you can put out as much of that slop as you want. And then people will watch it and actually believe in it too. I fucking hate this platform. Well, anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider subscribing and leaving a like. If you're interested, why not watch this video right here? And with that, I hope I'll see you in the next video.